All right, welcome. This is John Holland is with me. He is with well, tell us a little bit about yourself and your the company, your publishing company.
Well, I've been writing for pretty much forever. Recently, I've kind of created my own little imprint, DieBold Comics, which is reprinting some of the stuff that I had written back in the '90s with some of the other publishers like Fantagraphics and Malibu, different publishers, and some of the new stuff I'm working on right now too. Under Diebold right now, I've just printed the 11th copy. So I just started Diebold Comics last year. So between reprints and new stuff, I've printed 11 comics so far in the last year. I've got a few more coming up. Uh, you know, the problem's not having enough comics. The problem's having enough money to print them.
Oh, I, I'm not a creator myself, but I talked to enough people to know what what you mean. So before we get talking about the different comics that you've done, um, do you remember the first comic you read, or maybe the one that got you interested in the, in comics?
I don't remember maybe the first comic, but I've been reading since I was as about since I could hold a book. I remember the first books I've read were like Dr. Seuss books. The first book that I remember reading was Mike Mulligan's Amazing Steam Shovel.
Yes.
Yeah, and I actually still have that original book still. My brother had kind of transferred to my brother when he had kids, and then when his kids grew up, my brother saved the book and actually gave it to me for Christmas one year. So it's kind of cool. It's beat up and about to fall apart, but it's still a pretty cool little book. But the first comics I remember reading were probably like a lot of the Harvey stuff, like Casper, Hot Stuff. Uh, I think it was from DC, the Mouseketeers, uh, and books like that. And then kind of going from that into like Batman and different books. In the beginning, I kind of read everything, and it wasn't until I really got into Marvel that I kind of became more focused on Marvel for a lot of years and didn't read a whole lot else. But the first few years, I'd read almost anything I could get my hands on. So I don't remember the first exact comic, but I'd probably say, like I said, more the Harvey. Mouseketeers, some reason sticks in my mind.
Hmm.
Those comics, and then some of the big Batman and Superman 100 pagers and stuff like that.
Now, did you ever gravitate towards, a character or a certain, you know, one of the big two companies, I guess?
Not in the beginning. Once I got into Marvel, there was my brother and I. My brother's a couple years younger than I am, and we both kind of started collecting Marvels, and we kind of split the Marvel universe in half. He collected half of them, and I'd collect half of them. And probably one of my favorite characters was Daredevil. I remember, picking up and reading Daredevil. That was kind of like my main collection. But it was Daredevil, Fantastic Four. Hulk was another one that was a big one with me. Hulk and Daredevil were probably the two big comics in the very beginning. One of the first Daredevil I remember getting and starting to read was I think it was Daredevil 48 or 49. It was Barry Smith's first artwork for Marvel, and at that time he was really a Jack Kirby clone. His work really looked like Jack Kirby before he really got his style. And
Hmm.
it wasn't the best issue of Daredevil too. The main villain was a character called Star Saxon, which I don't think anybody remembers anymore. But some reason I kind of connected with it and just kind of started collecting Daredevil and just kind of continued for years. Once I got into that point, for years, that's pretty much all I bought was Marvel. And between my brother and myself, we pretty much bought almost every Marvel comic.
Cool. So what kind of made you want to, write your own?
I've always, besides writing, reading comics, I've always been a big reader, and I was like reading a lot of science fiction at that same time. And some of my favorite writers were writers like Isaac Asimov and Harlan Ellison were two of my favorite writers. And besides the fiction they wrote, uh, especially in their short story collections, they would always write these introductions that were almost as entertaining as the stories themselves sometimes. And a lot of it was about writing, how they wrote, and just the behind the scenes of that. And it just, that kind of clicked for me. And you know, from then I've just always wanted to write, you know, either books, not short stories, comics, but more comics, because comics always kind of was more special to me, I think, than anything else. I've always had that, you know, love of comics and wanted to write them.
So, as I mentioned in the introduction, I think I found, found you on one of the Facebook groups, and you see the first PDF, after we, kind of touched base, was Alma, and I, took a look at it. It's like, and I was like, okay, it's a garden gnome that cusses. You got me.
Yeah. Yeah. My tagline for Alma is, what if Buffy was a 72-year-old grandmother?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when I use that at conventions, even people that have never watched Buffy know who Buffy is. They know enough, because Buffy's become kind of an iconic character. You know, they, even if they've never watched it, they know enough about Buffy that when I tell them, what if Buffy was a 72-year-old grandmother, they can kind of connect to it, and they know what, at least the basis of what I'm talking about. So it's become one of my better selling books. My best selling comic, that, because most of my stuff through is conventions, you know, going to conventions. And my best selling comic is I did a book called A History of Voodoo, and that always outsells everything. And I've just actually redid that as Voodoo, because I've added some comic stories to it, with, in addition to the history. But Alma is fast becoming one of my better sellers. And my plan is for probably the end of summer, maybe August, the end of summer, is I'm going to kickstart the first issue and try to, you know, kind of get a little more up, get it a little further out there, and add a little bit more to the first issue. And we're already working on the second issue. It's written and the artist has it, and he's about 4 or 5 pages into it. So, and he's a pretty fast artist, so I figure I'm going to have that done within a month. And I've already got the third issue kind of plotted. I've actually already written the 25th issue too, so I've kind of skipped ahead. So, because I was introducing some new characters in issue 2 and 3, and after I wrote number 1, I was like, well, I want to get to these new characters. So I said, let me just pick an issue ahead of time, and I'm going to write it so I can use the new characters. So issue 2 introduces one new character, and issue 3 introduces another one, and then issue 25 is kind of like already everybody's connected. So.
And I know in our conversation before that your plans are to crowdfund, right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to try to kickstart crowdfund issue 1 of Alma.
Oh. So let's talk, if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit more about that. What is kind of, besides Buffy the Vampire Slayer, what's kind of the inspiration behind it? Because I know you have a nice prose piece at the beginning of the comic, or the file that you sent me.
Yeah, basically it was like, and I don't remember what group it was. It was somewhere on a Facebook group, and somebody was talking about how, like, in all the fantasy novels, when, you know, the hero is chosen to go defeat the evil, or to go rescue the princess or whatever, it's always the young, virile, you know, usually male. And then somebody on the Facebook group said something about, what if it was like somebody's grandmother? What if it was an old woman that got the power, that, you know, got chosen, you know? And it was the whole line was pretty much a joke about it. But for some reason, when I read it, it got me thinking. I was like, you know, this could be a pretty interesting take on the whole concept of, you know, of somebody getting the power to become like the champion, or to, you know, defeat evil. And it would be a different take than what we've seen so far. And then once I went from there, it's, you know, the tagline kind of just fell in place, because, you know, Alma doesn't fight vampires. It's more monsters and demons and things like that. So she's not like a direct takeoff of Buffy, but that just becomes an easy tagline for people to kind of grasp it in one, you know, quick situation.
Plus, you know, there's a lot of humor in it too. I mean, you have kind of her sidekick who, you know,
yes,
when she was young was a cherub, and then he comes back as Is that particular character based on anyone, or just kind of?
No, I think some of that goes back to, when I was really like in the 70s, and even now, one of my favorite comic book writers is Steve Gerber, the creator of Howard the Duck.
Yeah.
Even when he was writing, like, Defenders is one of my favorite group, series ever when he was writing it. And anything Steve Gerber wrote had a lot of weird and humor in it. He never, I mean, he would take things serious, but he could always really play off the absurd. And that's always been something I kind of like to throw into my stories and stuff. Even if they're serious, I like to put something in it that's a little weird, a little off kilter. And and then Buffy has her Watcher, and I didn't want to do a Watcher, but I wanted to have, like, Tyrone the gnome is what he calls himself, the internal companion. Every time there's a new champion, there's the companion that comes. And the previous one was basically like Cupid, and this one I was just trying to think of what could be the the most absurd kind of weird character for this, and I just figured the garden gnome.
So, I mean, I would love to have you back, when you're ready to start, and we can kind of delve a little deeper into that book, and at that time we can discuss what you'll be offering people.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's no, I was just going to say, but no, I just realized, I think I realized how I came to be connected with you, because the other book I wanted to talk about is being, I guess, published through It's Alive.
Yes, A Girl and Her Dog.
Yes.
Yes.
So, and I just, well, I'm friends with Drew Ford.
Okay.
And I, just did another interview with the one of the creators of Roach Milk the other day. So.
Oh yeah, because he's republishing that. Yeah, I've seen that too.
So I think I think that's probably explains how we got connected together.
It may be, yeah. Yeah. That was I actually self-published that first, and after I self-published it, Tony Isabella, who created Black Lightning, who worked for Marvel and DC for many years, I follow him on Facebook, and excuse me, he had posted like he was, he likes to review comics, and he had actually put his address up there. So I sent him a handful of my comics, and one of them was A Girl and Her Dog. Not really thinking he was ever going to get around to reviewing them, but and then one day I remember, because I was at work and I was looking through my phone, and I clicked on his blog, and he was reviewing comics, and I was kind of scrolling through it, and the last comic he actually reviewed on it was A Girl and Her Dog. So when I scrolled up and I seen the cover, I was kind of almost afraid to continue to read, because you didn't know what he was going to say about it. And actually, it was the best review I could have even asked for. He ends up calling it like one of the best comics of the year. So and I was posting that on Facebook. I'm going to take advantage of, if somebody's going to call it, one of the best comics of the year, I'm going to, post that. And Drew Ford had, seen it on Facebook, because I think Drew is a friend of Tony's too. And one night he contacted me on Facebook and asked if he could see the book. So I sent him a PDF file of the book. And about 30 minutes later, he texted me back and said, "Hey, I'd like to publish this book." And I was like, "Oh, great." It was the most simple. Within an hour, we had the deal done. And, he had already contacted his Diamond rep, and it was everything was done within like an hour. It's probably, I've never had any deal go through that quick and easily. It's like he sent me the contract. It was a great contract. And it was just like boom, boom, boom. And before I knew it, he was going to publish the book.
So tell me a little bit about that book, and what it's about. And
Girl and Dog's kind of kind of more of a slice of life type thing. It's basically the love of between Evie, who starts off at 15 years old in the book, and her dog. And even after the dog dies, he kind of comes back whenever she has like she's facing a crisis or something in her life. The dog kind of appears and just to give her comfort or whatever throughout the book. And it's kind of told. It's not told in a chronological order. I kind of skip around in it, so it goes from I think the first scene is she's 15 years old when she gets the dog. The next scene is when she's I think in her 60s, and then it goes back and forth. But it actually was, I kind of got the idea from it. I have a friend that her dog had just recently died, and it got me thinking about it. My dog had died probably about 4 years before, and I've always had a dog all my life, so.
We have two.
Yeah, and I haven't got one back yet, but I will eventually because I can't see not going without one. And it just got me thinking about the bond, you have between you and a dog, and it was actually one of the easiest books I ever wrote. I kind of went out on my porch one day and I ended up writing in about 6 hours. I stood there, I've got like a little desk that I can stand behind, and I just wrote it and shipped it off to Hernan, who's actually the same artist for Alma. And he drew it within a couple weeks, and we had it printed up and sell them, at shows. That was a little harder to sell at shows, to be honest, because it's a little harder to, explain, and it's not, it doesn't have anything that really grabs people, right?
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it grabbed me right away because we back in 2015, me and my wife got a rescue dog, and he only had he had one eye, but it didn't slow him down.
Yeah,
and we lost him 2.5 at the age of 2.5 suddenly.
wow.
And so any stories about dogs gets me right here.
Oh yeah, that's kind of me. Like I said, my last dog, and kind of going back to Buffy, my last dog's name was Buffy. It shows you I'm kind of a fan of the show. She'd actually she made it to about, I think she was 16 years old when she finally, just passed from old age. But it doesn't matter if you have 2 years or 16 years, it still affects you when they do.
Yeah. We've always been a dog family, and when I met my wife, she had a black lab, and he lived to be about 16 years old. And then she got a puppy at the time when we first started dating, and he's 12 now. So
yeah, now A Girl and Her Dog will be out in July. It's already been through the catalog. It just got through the catalogs, Diamond, just a couple weeks ago, and it's supposed to be published in the first week of July, I think, if things go right.
Well, I want to thank you for sending me the PDF, and like I said, I'll make it through eventually.
Yeah, I think when people read it, they like it's just hard for at conventions, when they pick it up and they see it's just about a girl and her dog, they're kind of like, oh, there's not a lot happening in it,
Yeah.
But once they read it, they really like it. So it's just kind of a matter of selling the book to them.
And I don't know if you can talk about the book or the one you told me about that's coming out later this year or at the end of the year.
Yes, actually, that's the T-shirt I'm wearing too. I don't know if you can see it, probably not. But 2 Tons of Fury is coming out through Antarctica Press in December, so it hasn't went through the distributor yet. It's basically starring Fat Man the Human Flying Saucer and Herbie, 2 characters from the 60s that are in the public domain now. That the artist on the book is a huge Herbie fan, and he's always been trying to get me to do something with Herbie. And honestly, every time I'd sit down to try to write something with Herbie, I just could not write something with Herbie. He was just very hard to write. And for some reason, Fat Man was always a character. I remember he only lasted 3 issues. He was published by Lightning Comics in like towards the end of the 60s, I think. And he was created by Otto Binder and CC Beck, the original artist on Captain Marvel.
Mhm.
And some reason, as silly as his stories were, I picked them up when they came out and loved them. And and their stories are really pretty silly. And Larry, who's the artist on it, he was doing like recreations of different versions of like Justice Society and Herbie covers that he was selling on eBay. And he drew a cover called 2 Tons of Fury with Herbie fighting Fat Man. And when I seen the cover, something just clicked. And I was like, all right, I'm going to try to write that story. And it actually wrote really easy. And I was able to write Herbie. Actually, he's never Herbie in the comic. He's always the Fat Fury in the comic. And I was able to write that story. And it's actually got a few other characters. I don't know if you remember a character from the same time period, another Captain Marvel character. He was from, I don't even remember what comic company he was from. It was another company that didn't last very long, but he was an android that yelled "split" and all his body parts fell apart. Yeah, nobody knows who he is. Nobody knows who he is.
See, I could be all, yes, I know.
Yeah. And he's in it. I also have what I consider the first superhero in comics, but he wasn't in a comic book. He appeared in comic strips in like 1904. He's a character called Billy Bounce. And basically he's Bounce, what's the name from Legion? Bouncing Boy?
Bouncing Boy, yep.
He's just like Bouncing Boy from Legion, but he appeared in like 1906. And his power was, he bounced around, and all that. So he's actually in the comic. And it's just a fun comic. There's no, nothing in it, but just a lot of silliness and a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed doing it. And so far the people have liked it, they've seen it, really have liked it. The art and everything's been done. We had it off to a colorist, and the colorist has did an amazing job on it. He's actually colored it and made the pages and everything look like it's from the 60s. So when this comic comes out, it's going to look like it's something from like a lost comic from that time period. Even the pages in the comic look like they're like, how an old comic page kind of turns that color. Yeah, he's made it look like that. So
now you just have to capture the smell.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, we can figure that out. We'll be perfect. So I've just actually got the last couple pages of that done. So we just finally have that done, and we're going to get that out to Antarctica Press. And like I said, that's going to be out in December. So I don't know how far Diamond is, I think 2 months ahead or 3 months ahead. So it'll be probably coming out in the catalog in either September or October.
Cool. Now, I can tell that you love creating your own stuff, but if Dream Chance, one of the big 2 companies, approaches you and says you can write any character you want, who is it?
That would be tough. I don't know. I would definitely, would work for anybody. One, just the financial freedom. Because right now, this is nowhere near, paying any bills, No,
I understand.
But I don't know, Daredevil's always, like I said, Daredevil's always been one of my favorite characters.
Mm-hmm.
But he would be hard to write after like Frank Miller and Bendis and Brubaker. They've done some pretty iconic runs on Daredevil. It'd be hard to come up with a new concept for him, I think. But he'd be one. Actually, Batman would not be probably one of my, I wouldn't turn Batman down. That'd be crazy. But
who would?
Yeah, exactly. But Batman's never been, especially late. I've never been a big fan of the dark and gritty, Batman.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite Batman recently has been Tom King, and that's just because he's kind of, during Tom King's run, you actually seen Batman smile a few times.
Yeah.
Times, it just, I don't mind dark and grim characters, but after a while, it can get kind of old.
Yeah.
The Defenders would be, I would like to do a Defenders comic, because like I said, Steve Gerber's Defenders run was one of my favorite runs of any comic, out there. And that would be kind of cool to take those characters and see what I could do with them, something like that.
So, you do you have any, or sorry, what writers kind of have influenced, your style of writing? Because again, from what I've seen, you are very eclectic in your approach
Yeah.
with the different things you write.
I try. That's one thing I try, like I do a lot of different comics and I try not to, I don't know, I've had some writers tell me that you should pick one genre or one style and really stick with that, but I can't do that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of all over the place. But probably some of my, like Harlan Ellison, I had mentioned before, he's he used to hate to be called a science fiction writer. He's more of a kind of a fantasy, but he doesn't write like trolls and elves and stuff like
Right.
that. I don't know if you're familiar with he's written like Repent Harlequin Said to TikTok Man, I Have No Mouth and Must Scream, books, stories like that. And he was basically a short story writer.
Mhm.
Isaac Asimov, Stan Lee. I grew up with Stan Lee. I'm old enough to have read, Stan Lee when he was actually writing comics.
Listen here, true believer.
Yeah. Steve Gerber.
Yep, I know. I figured that since
Steve Gerber, and actually a lot of my reading and comics, I really was to me, I think my golden age of reading comics was like in the 70s and especially at Marvel when like Marv Wolfman was there, Len Wein, Steve Gerber, Steve Englehart. Those writers really influenced a lot of, I think, my writing on comics. More recently, Bendis, I know Bendis is, some of his
wordy.
stuff I love, yeah. And some of his stuff is, a little hard to take, but he actually, I've never been one of those people that dropped out of comics completely. A lot of people have their stories, they were in comics, then they kind of outgrew them and then they came back. But there was a time I almost got out of, I was down to reading maybe just, I think I was reading like Love and Rockets, Bone, Dave Sims, Cerebus, just a few comics, maybe 3 or 4, and they were all indie comics at the time because most of the Marvel and DC I just had kind of given up on. And it was weird. As much as I wasn't reading comics, I was reading a lot of the blogs or the news sites about comics. So even though I wasn't reading a lot of them, I could probably have told you what was going on in most of them. And a lot of that was when Bendis had started his Daredevil run. And there was a lot of, everybody was really praising it. So I started to pick that up. And he kind of got me back into like mainstream comics because his Daredevil run was really good. And I really enjoyed that. And, and I kind of followed him for a while. And I'll kind of, anything he does, I'll give it a try. Lately, I haven't really stuck with a lot of what he's done. I know now he's kind of moving back more into like the independence. I think he's almost moved away from DC completely.
I think so. I think he's finishing up, I guess, whatever he had to, do.
Yeah. I tried Joy. Part of the problem too is sometimes it's just hard to get comics at my comic shop. It's like I'll forget which ones I'm. If I don't put them in for to folder to pick, it's like I'll go back and forget which ones I'm looking at and stuff. And then I think I picked up his Joy Operations, the first issue, and then I missed like the next 3 or 4 issues and just never have gotten back to it. But Ed Brubaker is one that I've kind of come to late. I've started picking up his Reckless novels, if you want to call it, or his hardbacks, which I'm really enjoying those. And I went back and actually bought the Criminal Omnibuses, and been reading a lot of his past stuff. I've always kind of picked a little bit here and there of his stuff, but I've never really got into it a lot. And then some reason it finally clicked with me, and I'm really enjoying his stuff. Reckless, I'm really enjoying. Those books are really good as they come out. And he's doing that Friday through Panel Syndicate that I'm enjoying. Brian Vaughan Saga, That's one that, has been really, so those are some of the more, I guess recent writers. A lot of times if I read something I really like, I have, it'll make me want to do something along the same lines. Like after I read Ed Breaker, it makes me want to go do a crime book, just because, it's like, and actually I did do one of my books that I did was called The Getaway Driver, which is kind of my version of a, kind of an Ed Breaker story.
Cool. Well, like probably need to wrap up here, and I'm sure we could probably talk for hours on end.
Oh yeah.
and whenever you're ready to, kickstart the book, I'd love to talk to you again, and maybe we can get more into that book. But until then,
definitely.
Where can people, check you out?
You can find me on Facebook. Just look up under my name, John Holland. I have a website, DieBoldComics.com. That has pretty much every comic that, I've published through DieBold, and a lot of the stuff that I've republished, but I didn't publish it under DieBold yet. When I reprint them, I will. And you can read the first 4 pages of every comic there. You can buy the comics there. You can buy a lot of other stuff, t-shirts and that type of stuff. And then on Twitter, I'm on at DieBold Comics.
Cool.
Twitter, I'm not a big user of it. Kind of like usually whatever's on Twitter is what I kind of post on Facebook, and it kind of puts, or Instagram, it just puts it back on Twitter. I haven't learned how to use Twitter too well yet.
Probably a good thing.
Yeah, I've heard horror stories about it too. So,
well, I really enjoyed, talking with you, and I definitely want to, come back, have you back, and talk some more. And I'm sure, like I said, we could probably talk all evening about the stuff. And
oh yeah, comics and stuff. Yeah, actually, I have to let you know too. You're my first podcast. I haven't done a podcast before, so you're my first podcast. So it went very well. So thank you.
Well, the rest of them won't be as awkward. All right. Well, I want to, again, thank you and have a good evening, and definitely we'll be in touch.
Yes, thank you very much. You have a good evening.